We're ready to begin, and we'll begin with prayer. Dear Lord God, Heavenly Father, as we look to our lives in this world, we see it's a world filled so often with hate and hateful thoughts and even hateful actions. And yet we know that you are in control of all things. And we know that you've given the antidote to fight against that hate. And that antidote is the gospel message, the message of love that is ours from you through Jesus Christ, a message that empowers us to love others and not hate others. Be with us as we study your word this evening. Help us to see what place you play in our life and how you give us the true wisdom that is needed. Amen. All right, we are looking at the whole aspect in this one on self-control under the cross, as we're going down the various characteristics, Christian attributes that are there, and the secular attributes that are there. We're still in looking at self-control right now. And in all of these, we're looking at the two sides of the road with the narrow middle. And so when it comes to self-control, the one side of the road that you fall into the ditch would be hedonism or materialism. And what's hedonism or materialism? Flesh and money. Giving yourself into making the most important things as far as the material wealth of this world, or all the pleasures the world has to give, that is there. On the other extreme, we're going to find what we're going to talk about today, asceticism. And what is asceticism?
Maybe like a monk or something.
Like a monk, going to live in a monastery, being a hermit out in the desert. What is the thought behind being a monk in a monastery, a nun in a nunnery, or a hermit in the desert? What's the whole thought behind doing something like that? Okay, you don't have to worry about worldly things. True.
Much more study.
Much more study.
But you're working your way towards
Okay, you're going to end up working your way, but the whole thought is you're going to take yourself away from all the sins of the world, the sinful pleasures, so that you are not going to be dragged into those sins. The joke at Martin Luther's time was you had this monastery on this hill, you had this nunnery on this hill, and in the valley you had the orphanage. You know, so even the whole thing of putting yourself away outside of the world does not lead to the whole aspect of the sinful things of the world becoming a part of your life. And why is that? We all have a sinful nature that is there. So we're going to be looking at asceticism now, and we'll read the quote there. Now it's quite evident the monks have taught and preached that their contrived spiritual status makes satisfaction for sin and obtains grace and righteousness. Exactly what I think you, Loretta, said, that you're meriting, you're working your way to salvation. No one can deny that the monks also taught and preached that they became righteous and earned forgiveness of sins through their vows and monastic life. Besides all this, they persuaded the people that these humanly contrived spiritual orders, that is the monasteries, were states of Christian perfection. And what's that saying? That once you're in a monastery, you can find Christian perfection. You can find your own righteousness that is there. Now it is no small offense in the Christian church to present to the people a service of God which human beings have contrived without God's command. And what's that meaning? They have contrived without God's commands. When it comes to all these monasteries, the asceticism, did God ever command that we do that?
No, the opposite.
He commanded the opposite. What did he say about the world? Yeah. Stay in the world, be lights to the world, be the salt of the world, etc., not leave the world. Teaching that such service of God makes people innocent and righteous before God. For righteousness of faith, which ought to be emphasized most, is obscured when people are bedazzled with this strange angelic spirituality and false pretense of poverty, humility, and chastity. Why does that Augsburg Confession call this whole ascetic life a strange angelic spirituality?
Well, they think they can achieve perfection just by living that life in that monastery.
Yeah, strange angelic spirituality. When you look at the angels, other than the fallen ones, of course, which we call now demons, but the angels are righteous or, yeah, they're righteous. And so you think with this angelic spirituality, we can be righteous on our own. What's taken out of the picture? The righteousness of faith. And what is the righteousness of faith? Yeah, what Christ has done for us, he gives us his righteousness that is ours through faith. Now, regardless of what a person's motivation might be to practice asceticism or monasticism, forms of renouncing worldly pleasures, or for that matter to seek any religious value from complete self-denial, what are the dangers pointed out in the confessions above? We talked about that already. What are the dangers? Pride. Self-righteousness. Pharisaism. I can get to heaven on my own. Look at how good I am. I can be perfect in this life. By the way, is it wrong to strive for perfection in this life? No. But we do that with what reality in mind? Can't achieve it. And thus we need the Lord's forgiveness. We need the Lord's help each and every day. But they think they can achieve that perfection that is there. And so as you look at that, in its most basic form, asceticism is seeking to eliminate desires entirely so as to generate merit before God. Also, what is worldly pleasure? What makes a pleasure worldly and not something given by God to enjoy and point to him? And that's a whole another aspect of this that we haven't dwelled on yet. And God has given us all kinds of worldly pleasures, hasn't he? Yes. And are they bad? No. What's the point of God giving us those worldly pleasures? Happiness and joy in various things, music which fills the soul, or even movies that we can watch, etc., as long as they're good, in two ways, moral and also aesthetically. But those pleasures are there to make our life better in this world. There's nothing wrong with them. And one of the things you get then is, if you're going to withhold all those worldly pleasures because that's going to keep sin out of my life, you find that's not enough. Then what do you resort to, which Martin Luther did and the monks at Martin Luther time? How did he try to find that rightness with God as he entered that monastery? It wasn't just deny yourself the pleasures of the world, the material goods of the world, but what?
Sometimes they did physical things, like
Yeah.
hurting themselves, or
He beat his back, whipped his back. He slept out in the cold. He did all these things thinking, now this is going to make him more right with God. Chase those things all away. And again, it all gets down into Pharisaism. I can get myself to heaven on my own. Never happened. The righteousness we need is not something we can attain. It's something only we have with God. And so the narrow middle between this asceticism and this whole aspect of hedonism, if you want to use that word, is self-control. And that self-control is so very important in our life. A second here. So the medium of self-discipline is our next, as we go on. The medium of self-discipline, 2 Timothy 1:6-7. I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For the Spirit of God gave us, the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. Gives us self-discipline, power, love, self-discipline. Proverbs 25:28, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Why is a person who lacks self-control like a city whose walls are broken through? Here's this city being besieged by a foreign army. The walls are broken through, and what happens?
It falls.
If the city falls, but in what way? All the enemy soldiers come pouring in, doing all kinds of destruction. And a lack of self-control caused the same thing. Lets all the sinfulness of the world come pouring in to destroy the person. Titus 1 verse 8, an elder must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. Now, God has given us a rich world with endless number of sources of enjoyment. As we mentioned earlier, pleasures, our bodies, and life together is a gift from God. Many activities can be enjoyed in a good way if we resist the extremes of gorging on pleasures or withholding those pleasures for the sake of doing meritorious works. It is in this context that the Bible talks about self-discipline and moderation. How can self-discipline be applied to many of the commandments? Below are some possibilities, and there's just a few things. For instance, the fifth commandment, moderation and bodily health. A little bit changed from the sheets here. Moderation and bodily health. The fifth commandment. What's the fifth commandment? You shall not murder. How does that provide self-control over moderation and bodily health? How do we break the fifth commandment? Harming our neighbor. So we do it by murdering someone. We can do it with our thoughts, hatred. We can do it by not taking their life, but by harming their body. All those things are part of that fifth commandment. But what else does the fifth commandment also talk about when it comes to the self? Just like you're not supposed to harm your neighbor in his body, you're not supposed to harm yourself in your body. And so when we come to this whole aspect of self-control, what's it talking about? Things such as what? When we're talking about moderation and bodily health.
Eat right and exercise.
Eat right and exercise on the positive level. And really, that is true. Eat right and exercise. On the negative with this, it's to just say no. Who is that? Nancy Reagan? Who is the big one with just say no? Just,
Yeah, I can't remember. That was the
I think it was Nancy Reagan made that her big slogan. Just say no. No what? Drugs and alcohol. The moderation with drugs and alcohol. And so you can look at that. Is the using of alcohol wrong? No. What was the first miracle that Jesus did? Changing water into wine for a wedding feast. We looked at that last week. The feast, the Lord of the feast, changing water into wine. But the overuse of it is wrong. Is using drugs wrong?
for self-satisfaction. Illegal drug, yes.
Okay, illegal drugs, yes, completely. Any use of that is wrong. But are there some drugs that is good for us to use? Yeah, like what? Cannabis, marijuana? No. Medicine. We use it all the time. Medicine. That is good. We're prescribed medicine, or sometimes there's over-the-counter medicine. We take it, it's good, et cetera, et cetera. But again, when we come to the fifth commandment, moderation and bodily health speaks about that. Sixth commandment, control over sexual passions. What is the sixth commandment? You shall not commit adultery. And what is this talking about? In the whole area of self-control, self-discipline, control over sexual passions, lust. The whole aspect that people have been created with a sexual desire within them. Why? Why would God do that? For kids. So there's kids. Plus for the strengthening of the marital bonds, because that sexual action is only for husband and wife, that oneness that is to keep their bond as that one entity strong. And so when you look at that sexualness used within God's guidelines, then it's fine. When it's not in God's guidelines, then it becomes wrong. And so then you get into the whole aspect of sexual passions out of control. So sex within marriage is good. Sex outside of marriage is wrong. Now, what are some examples of sex outside of marriage? Okay, having an affair. Sex outside, sex with someone you're not married to. Whether it's before marriage, during marriage, after marriage, you're not in a marriage relationship and you're having sex with that person. That includes, by the way, heterosexuality as well as homosexuality. As well as homosexuality. Because even though a government might say that homosexual marriages are legal, they can be legal in the country, are they legal in God's eyes? And the answer is no. And so any sex outside of marriage is wrong. And that's what the Bible says, that's what the Bible teaches, and that's what we hold to. Well, but these two people, two men or these two women love each other. Isn't it right for them to get married? If they really like each other, what can they do? Be friends. Do we have an example of that in the Bible? Old Testament, around the time of Saul, Jonathan and David. It talks about the close friends they were, but they were not married. They were not sexual, but they had a close relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is there. So again, to self-discipline and bodily health, moderation. Bodily health too. You look at bodily health. How can you talk about bodily health with the sixth commandment? What bodily health? STDs, the sexually transmitted diseases that are there. The unwanted pregnancies that can be there, etc. And you can go down the line with all of that. Seventh commandment, indulging in possessions. Seventh commandment, you shall not steal. Talks about greed. What is greed? Wanting more and more and more and more, and focusing your whole thoughts on that. Give me an example from the Bible where greed, and we're going to talk about that in this sermon on Sunday, from 1 Timothy 6, godliness with contentment is great gain. Those who have given themselves into the lust for things have gone into ruin, etc., etc. Give me an example from the Bible where greed has led to all kinds of, if you will, disaster. Solomon. Everything. I had everything. I wanted everything. I got everything. And then finally at the end, after he had lost his faith, he came back to faith. And what does he say about everything? Meaningless, like a vapor in the air. He learned. Or you could say King Ahab and Nahab's vineyard. He wanted the vineyard. He went and talked to Naboth and said, can I buy your vineyard? Naboth said, no, it's in my family and it's going to stay in my family, which was rightfully so. Can I trade for it? No. What did King Ahab do after that?
Went crying to Jezebel.
Went crying on his bed. He threw himself on his bed and threw a temper tantrum. Jezebel comes in. And so what happened after that? What other commandments were broken because of that greed, that breaking of the seventh commandment? The fifth commandment, ultimately. Before that, the 6.
Coveting.
7th is coveting, or 9th and 10th is coveting. The 8th commandment got some of the elders of the city to take him out in their court, which was outside the city gates, lie about him, and then they, 5th commandment, stoned him to death. And so again, the indulging in possessions. 8th commandment, restraining and loosing the tongue, including in anger. The whole aspect of saying things before you're thinking, or just being a hothead and saying things and hurting other people. The very thing is, when you say something, what? You can't take it back. It's been heard. You know, it's much the same as you look at, I'll just do something that's in the news right now, this whole assassination of Charlie Kirk that took place. You have a number of late night shows or people or reporters that got, if you will, canceled, their jobs taken away. Jimmy Kimmel is just the latest one because of how they covered it and what they said. That it was his fault, that, or Jimmy Kimmel said he was part of the MAGA or whatever it was, but different things along that line. Once you put something out there on the internet, even if you scrub it from your website or whatever the things are, I never use any of those social media things, but even if you scrub it, take it down.
People have already read it and they've already passed it along.
And the screenshot is there. There's always a record of it. You can't take it back. That's there. And sometimes people learn the hard way that they need to be a little bit more judicious in what they say and how they say things that are there. If you look at 1 Corinthians 7, verse 5, to married couples, do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer, then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now this is from 1 Corinthians 7. 1 Corinthians 7 starts out with Paul answering a question. Now about the matter you wrote about. He answers it by saying, it is good for a man to not marry. What? If men don't marry, there would be no children. And we have a real low birth rate the way it is in our country. By the way, just an aside on this, and I don't know if I talked about this last week or not, but the pastor at Peace in Gilbert, he accepted a call to be a recruitment director for the Board for Ministerial Education as a whole, not for a school, but just for the Board for Ministerial Education. And he made the comment that with the low birth rate in our country right now, he said it's so extremely low that they're looking at in, 10 years, 12 years, we're going to have about 320 pastoral vacancies in our synod.
That means you can't retire.
Which means there's going to be a number of churches that are just going to have to close. And so the synod came up with this idea of having a 5-person team, both men and women, a 5-person team to look at recruitment for ministry as a whole, not just for a specific school, to try to work with parents, because there's a number of kids not going to parochial schools. And you look at the numbers in our parochial schools, some of our parochial schools have 90% of their kids are not from the church, not WELS. And so you look at that, and the projections they saw were so low. And so they're to look at just recruitment in general. One of the persons who they called and he accepted already was a guy who was a recruiter for the National Guard. And he quit that job because he wanted to be involved with this. And his big idea is to go after the people coming out of the military after 20 years. He says here they're disciplined, they've been taught various things, and he said they still have quite a bit of their life ahead of them. what a wonderful way to try to get them into the ministry, which is kind of a good thought too, to try to focus on that particular aspect also. But the low birth rate that is there. Paul said it's good for a man not to marry. Why did he make that statement?
Focus on God more.
Because he says, I'm not married. You can focus on God more. But he goes right on to say, but here's what marriage is all about. It's good for people to be married. And here he's talking about rather to let lustful passions be there. He's saying to married couples, do not deprive each other except by mutual consent for a time. Then James 1, verses 19 through 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. It does not produce the righteousness God desires. Anger produces what? Hateful words and hateful actions, as we've seen recently. Hateful words, hateful actions that take place, things that you do you can't take back. And you look at that shooter of Charlie Kirk. What motivated him to do what he did? Hatred. He was so filled with hatred. And again, when you're filled with hatred, you think you're justified in doing anything. You can do anything you want because I'm right in doing this. It's my right. And this person needs to be put down. When we talk about putting down, usually we talk about what? Animals. Animals. But it's put down as far as get them out of our life. Life will be so much better if they're gone. And again, the medium of self-discipline is that self-control, God. And God is there to control us. When we look at the Lord and our relationship with God, that helps us to put again away those passions.
Another one too is not marry. And look at the Catholic Church. That should not, the priest not marry.
Priest not marrying.
Creates all kinds of trouble with altar boys.
Well, yeah, and really there's a twofold reason behind that. You look at throughout the years, the Catholic Church, the priests have always been immoral, put it that way. Not all of them, but some of them have been immoral with various things going on. But then it became a real big thing. It used to be a real big thing. I'm hoping it's not taking place anymore, but with all the altar boys and things like that, with the homosexual activity that it was there. Why do you think that took place? Why wasn't it with the girls in the congregation? Why was it with the boys?
Well, the priesthood tended to pull people in that had that homosexual tendency.
Right, because it started with some of them in there, and then it became known in the homosexual community. This was a good area where you can cultivate the homosexual relationships that were there. And so all of a sudden you had homosexuals gravitating toward the priesthood. And so it became more and more of a problem for them, which the church finally, the Catholic Church finally took care of. When? When did they finally say we got to put a stop to all this?
A few years ago, maybe. I don't know, but not.
Why? But I mean, why?
It got out.
When it got out and they started getting
Sued.
and priests being put in prison, but especially the lawsuits, the multi-million-dollar damages that were there. And then finally they knew they had to take action, though they weren't kind of willing to. They always wanted to put it behind the scenes under that, because there was a culture of homosexuality.
The way they did it, I mean, they took the one guy from the church and they put him in a school.
Yeah, they'd move them around, and yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but, well, if we just change the setting, and no, that's not really it. Temperance, edification, and adiaphora. What's adiaphora? Something neither forbidden nor commanded by the Bible, by God. So something that's neither forbidden nor commanded. We have the thing, if you look at the Ten Commandments, Basically, you could say these are God's do's and God's don'ts. A lot of God's don'ts, but God's do's and don'ts. This you can do, this you can't do. But there are things, and you can talk about it being black and white, but there are a lot of things in this world as we deal with them that are in the middle. We call that, they're not black or white, but they're gray. Gray. Well, how do you approach all that? The Apostle Paul, in looking at the adiaphron, now remember, we're not talking about things that have been commanded or forbidden by God, but the adiaphron things, Paul says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. So when it comes to adiaphora things, if it's neither commanded nor forbidden by God, the Christian can do them. However, the Christian may also not do them. And when would it be a case that the Christian would not do them, even though they could do them?
When it might affect a weaker brother or sister.
Yeah, when it affects a weaker brother or sister, when it offends them. For instance, you have people that approach their Christian life with various viewpoints. There are some who think that dancing is wrong. Is dancing wrong? Or is that an adiaphoron?
If you can't dance, then it's wrong.
I like that answer. Is it wrong? Can it be wrong? But it's not wrong. But there are some who in their hearts, in their conscience, feel it's wrong. Christians shouldn't dance. And that used to be a big thing years ago. I don't know if it's around too much anymore. Or you could say the same thing, they feel that drinking's wrong. Or you could even take the drinking a different direction, that can you drink alcohol? As long as you're not over drinking. Yeah. When might you say, I'm not going to drink any alcohol, even though I can? When you got to drive. If you're going around with someone who deals with alcoholism. So you invite friends over to a football game, a football party that is there, and you know that one of them is an alcoholic, has problems with it. Which, by the way, alcoholics shouldn't watch football games anyways. Why not? Someone said it. The beer commercials. And I've been told this by at least 4 alcoholics, that they always have a problem in football season because of the ads on when they're watching the football games, that finally they have to just stop watching football games because there's so many beer ads and it just plays on them so hard. So you invite someone over, you say, okay, we're not going to have any alcohol here because I don't want to put this person in a bad situation. Now, I could have alcohol, but the reason I'm not having alcohol here is out of love for this other person that is there. And so that's basically what Paul is saying. I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. And so again, you're always looking at, yes, I can do it, but should I do it? And the whole answer to that, should I do it, is, in what you said, Rashida, is it going to cause harm to a weaker brother or cause offense to someone else? Then you don't do it, even though you could. And the whole reason you don't do it is out of Christian love that is there. Now, the Lord has given us considerable Christian freedom in many areas in life and many practices and activities. Why does the Lord give us so much freedom? In other words, we like, and I'm sorry, but we like yes and no, black and white, do this, don't do this, and leave it at that. We don't like the gray. And that's one of the things, by the way, when the the Synod came out with, the Conference of Presidents came out with a statement on men and women in the Bible, etc. They had a lot of criticism because people said, we want you to give all kinds of concrete examples on either side. And they said, no, there is so much gray area here. There's a lot of gray area here that you have a principle. So they gave the principles. Here are the principles. Now you put them into practice according to your Christian freedom that is there. And so why does the Lord give us so much freedom? Why does he not say, I'm going to give you 503 commandments? Boy, imagine learning that in confirmation class. Boy, Martin Luther would have had a big time with, what does this mean?
Gives you a better judgment for the gray area.
Yeah, it gives us the opportunity to
Live, so to speak.
Exercise our faith.
exercise our faith in how we deal with these things out of love, not for self, but for the others around. An opportunity for us to show our love for others around us. Oh, we would love to have all the rules there, so we know exactly what the Lord. By the way, would we still carry them out? No. We aren't too good with the 10 ones he's given us, much less 503. So why does he give us so much freedom? God is giving us opportunities to exercise self-control and wisdom for the building up of others rather than simply for our own desires that are there. And so again, it's so we take what the Lord has taught us and live it. We put it into practice with the overall second table of the law in mind. And what's the second table of the law? Love your neighbor as yourself. And so it gives us the opportunity to put that into practice, to turn from self, turn to others and say, what's good for building others up? Even though I have the right to do it, I'm not going to do it for their sake that is there. So, that is adiaphora. Now we turn to part 6 of our study, wisdom under the cross. When we talk about wisdom under the cross, as we're going down our listing there, which wisdom? What wisdom are we talking about? Which means there's more than one type of wisdom. Well, let's look at that. When we use the word wisdom, we usually mean it in two different ways: transcendent wisdom and practical wisdom. What is transcendent wisdom? Transcendent wisdom deals with the ultimate questions of reality and how they bear on our view of the world and each other. Practical wisdom deals with prudence. That is a combination of experience and reason, which is distinct from the brute accumulation of fact or information. Experience and reason, that by experience and reason, we are able to deal with these various things there. Whereas transcendental wisdom is more the ethereal wisdom. And we have it, for example, listed there. When we talk about seeking out sages and gurus, it's often not for practical wisdom, but instead for transcendent wisdom. What's the meaning of life? Is there a God? Is there such a thing as destiny, and what is mine? What's the ultimate nature of the universe? All these big things about ourselves and how we fit in with everything and everyone else. But when we talk about seeking the wisdom of an elder co-worker, it's often not for transcendent wisdom, but practical wisdom. What are the best principles for success in this business? How can I best interact with the CEO? What skills am I lacking for closing a deal? All the practical things that affect us in life as we deal with our job, with parenting, with school, or whatever it might be. And you could say a lot of the how-to things that are there. So, prudence. Look at prudence. Practical wisdom deals with prudence. Prudence. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. These are all things from Confucius. Respect yourselves and others will respect you. Never, here's one for you, Rashida. Never give a sword to a man who can't dance. Why is that?
Lacks rhythm.
So he's going to probably hurt himself rather than the other person. Never give a sword to a man who can't dance. Not to discuss with a man worthy of conversation is to waste the man. To discuss with a man not worthy of conversation is to waste words. The wise waste neither men nor words. All from Confucius. Now, the above are a sampling of Proverbs of Confucius. At least based on the quotes above, is Confucius a guide for transcendent wisdom or for practical wisdom? And again, practical, what you could say, is a how-to. Transcendent is a being, your being or the bigger picture that is there. Are these all things that are part of the bigger picture of life, or are these all kind of how-to things? These are how-to, practical things that are there. More the practical rather than transcendent. We often think of Confucius as imparting transcendent wisdom, but he was actually more useful for practical wisdom. And so Chinese politicians especially studied the Proverbs. They got all kinds of practical things from the Proverbs that he had there. Unlike science, which can achieve a certain amount of certainty, prudence is more of an art form. The drawing on of experience and knowledge to reason out a possible beneficial approach to a problem. In that light, creativity is associated with prudence. Brilliant, creative solutions are often described as a product of a practically wise person. For example, consider Solomon's wisdom as judge, 1 Corinthians 3:16-28. The king said, Solomon said, "This one says, my son is alive and your son is dead. While this one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive." What prompted this? What's the context to all this?
Two women, one said the baby was stolen, hers died, and the other said the opposite.
Right. There were two women who had babies, and the one mother rolled over on her baby at night and it died. And so what did she do?
Traded baby.
Yeah, she put the dead baby with the other woman and took her baby for her own. And so they had a big dispute about whose baby is whose baby. So they went to Solomon, the judge, to see what he would rule and judge on it. Then the king said, Solomon said, verse 24, "Bring me a sword." So they brought a sword for the king. He then gave an order, "Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of love for her son and said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in two." Then the king gave his ruling, "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard the verdict the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. And so this would be what kind of wisdom again? Would this be transcendent wisdom or practical wisdom? Practical. He used reason and experience to make a decision, a judgment. So they both brought the baby, said, "This baby is mine," but he knew that the true mother truly loved the baby, while the other mother was just using it as a possession, if you will. I want my possession, because a mother loves her own child, and we're going to get into this in the next lesson, where we get into the various types of love. One is storge, the love of parents to a child. A parent loves their own child exactly the same as they love the children of other people, right? No, it's a lot stronger. Solomon knew that from experience, and with his reason, he devised a way to tell which was which, and he did that wise judgment there. Or you could look at Proverbs 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instructions in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Now, according to the author, what's the purpose of the book of Proverbs? To provide primarily what kind of wisdom? Prudent, the practical wisdom. For giving prudence to those who are for doing what is right, just, and fair. Let the wise listen and add to their learning the discerning guidance that is there. And so basically it is the practical, though the last sentence gets us into a different one. And that's the next question that is there. To provide primarily what kind of wisdom? Learning what is just, right, and fair. This is primarily the work of moral guidance. There is plenty of transcendent wisdom, but that work itself is really a guide of practical wisdom that is there. Till you get to how is the fear of the Lord the beginning of practical wisdom, prudence? And if you're thinking it's also the beginning to transcendent wisdom, you're right. We'll get to that in a moment. But how is it also the beginning of practical wisdom? How is the fear of the Lord the beginning of practical wisdom? What is the fear of the Lord? Oh no, he's going to get me. I'm a sinner. Oh, God, how can I make you love me? What can I do to make you love me? Maybe if I enter a monastery and whip my back, you'll love. Is that the fear of the Lord? Awe and respect. But the fear of the Lord is beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is believing in the Lord. Faith in the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, yes, as Dave said, transcendent wisdom, because that covers our whole life and our being, means for being here and our eternity that is there. But how is it also practical wisdom? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of practical wisdom.
By having his beliefs that he lays out has a lot of practical.
Right, because the fear of the Lord, knowing that we believe in God, that we are God's children, gives us all kinds of practical, if you will, aspects to our life. I'm in trouble. Oh, I can't take care of this. Maybe I should just end my life. No, what do? Take it to the Lord in prayer. I'm a child of God. I take it to the Lord. He's going to take care of me. He's going to take care of it for me. Practical. That is there. How do I live in this world? The fear of the Lord, being a child of God, means I'm going to live my faith, which is to do what? Give glory to the Lord in all that I do. Whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do it all for the glory of the Lord. And so, again, there's a practical aspect to all of this, but it doesn't take away from the transcendent part that is there, because it affects our whole eternity, our whole being of who we are. Now, transcendent wisdom, on the other hand, education can help us only if it produces whole men. The truly educated man is not a man who knows a bit of everything, not even the man who knows all the details of all subjects, if such a thing were possible. The whole man, in fact, may have very little detailed knowledge of facts and theories, but he will be truly in touch with the center. He will not be in doubt about his basic convictions, about his view on the meaning and purpose of his life. He may not be able to explain these matters in words, but the conduct of his life will show a certain sureness of touch which stems from his inner clarity. Here, Schumacher's educated man is his way of describing a person of transcendent wisdom. How is it possible for a person to be wise, or in Schumacher's language, educated, but know very little about the subjects we study in school and university? According to what he says there, the educated man knows what?
It's almost like the meaning of life.
Yeah. his view on the meaning and purpose of his life. He knows what that's all about. He may not know all the intricacies of advanced mathematics or all the intricacies of mechanical or electrical engineering, or even be very well versed in philosophies or poetry or different things along that lines, things that you learn about in school. But he has that conviction of what his purpose is in life and his meaning. Even if he can't put it into words, you can see what it is by what? His conduct of life. By the conduct of his life, he'll show that, the conduct of his life. And so that's the transcendent part that is there. And so note then that someone who might be a guide in transcendental wisdom may not be a good source of practical wisdom in a specific area of expertise. For example, your pastor may have a lot of transcendent wisdom to teach, such as the doctrine of vocation makes all work meaningful, but may not be a good source of practical wisdom, such as whether or not you should take a specific job that is there. He doesn't know everything about that whole thing to make a good choice on what you should do about that job. And oftentimes, what would the pastor say? Take it to the Lord in prayer. He doesn't know. He knows enough about the Bible, about our lives as Christians, the transcendental. Take it to the Lord in prayer, and the Lord will, in His way, lead you. In His way, lead you along the way that is there. And so, again, transcendent wisdom, and according to Schumacher, even if you don't have much schooling, you have that transcendent wisdom. Because in your life you've come to certain formulations of your guidance in life, your meaning for life, your purpose in life, and that. All right. So let's look at the next part, biblical transcendent wisdom. So that was secular transcendent wisdom. Let's look at biblical transcendent wisdom. Solomon demonstrates transcendent wisdom in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 3:19b through 20, everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. And what's the point that Solomon's making there? That everything in this world is meaningless. Why even live? I mean, we came from dust. We're going to go to dust. We die. So why even live? Is that the point he's making? Or is the point he's making that everything in this world is temporary, and in this world we are temporary, but what's meaningful is knowing God and knowing the salvation we have in God. However, as you look at the next one, Ecclesiastes 3:10 through 11, I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. So everything is beautiful in its time. There's a lot of wondrous things in this world. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. In the NIV's footnotes, or has placed ignorance in the heart of the human heart, so that no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Compare the NIV's chosen translation of Ecclesiastes 3:10 through 11, which also, by the way, is the way the Evangelical Heritage Version translates it, with the possible variant pointed out by the translators. What difference does a translation make? What difference does it make in the transcendent wisdom Solomon is imparting? How does Ecclesiastes 3:19b through 20 help to understand? I have seen the burden God has placed on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. And when, again, this is a Hebrew word that is hard to translate with various meanings, but set eternity in the human heart. When you hear that phrase, see that phrase, which is really the way I think it should be translated, what is that saying? He has set eternity in the human heart.
We know there's eternity.
We know there's eternity, that there's something after death. There are no atheists in foxholes. Why not? They're facing death and they know there's something beyond that. And so he said eternity in the heart. If you use the ignorance one there, the ignorance is that there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And we don't know what happens after death or whatever else it is. I still think the eternity is a better way of translating that. But now, what difference does it make in the transcendent wisdom Solomon is imparting to know that there's, he said eternity in the human heart. The transcendent wisdom is, when it comes to my life in this world, I need to be living with what thought in mind always.
There's life after death.
There's life after death. What happens when I die? What comes next, and what's that all about? How does Ecclesiastes 3:19-20, and this is also why it said this is a better, eternity is a better one. Everything, all go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. This world is temporary. The transcendent thing is, this world is not everything, that this world's not going to last. Nothing I have in this world is going to last. I can't take anything with me that is there. And then you look at the bottom there, Proverbs 3:11-12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in. And a question is asked, does this passage teach transcendent or practical wisdom? Or hint, hint, both. So I just gave you the answer. It treats both. How is it? How is the whole aspect practical? You better be good or else. And so it's a teaching thing, a practical thing. If you do what is wrong, you get punished, and then you learn from that. How is it a transcendent thing?
He's showing you his love.
He's showing you his love, the aspect of making your life better. It's through that your life becomes better, because you're learning in life. The whole aspect is that I need to follow the rules, obey whatever it is that is there, and that then affects the whole life and your viewpoint going forward in life, not just for that instance. Not just that one instance, but for all things that are there. We're going to stop there, and next time we're going to continue on with foolish wisdom and the gospel, that is, as we continue on. Any questions? We'll close with prayer. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.